We have neither creed nor doctrine, but rather teach that all individuals have the right and the responsibility to discern and follow their own spiritual paths. Yet we come together to support and assist one another on our personal journeys and to build the beloved community together. I invite you to stay after the service for our coffee hour and conversation. It's bring your own coffee, of course. I will open up the microphones at coffee hour following the service so that people can check in about how they're feeling and what's on their hearts as we share in our time together. And now I invite you to take a breath and settle yourselves into a spirit of worship. Our call to worship is by Chip Rausch. Deeper than DNA, more fundamental than molecules or quarks, at our living core, we are wholeness and transfiguring love. We often forget that power, becoming lonely or resentful, comparing ourselves to others, acting out of our fears rather than living our glory. Occasionally, we rouse from our trance to remember our wholeness. For a time, we embody unsentimental love. We make efforts to wake others and to remain fully present in ourselves. Our lives and our time here are made sacred by our striving. For this next hour and for the rest of our lives, may we be more aware of the spirit of life evolving through and among us. So may we be. In this spirit, let us worship together. Let us speak the words of our chalice lighting, and then light our chalices together. Fire brings a blessing of warmth, even as it brings the fear of burning destruction. May we recall this balance between awe and fear, and recommit to this life in which we dance on the edge of the great mystery today and each day. And if you have a chalice or a candle, you might light its flame now and type, "The flame is lit," and where you are coming from in your chat bar. The chalice is lit here in the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Indiana, Pennsylvania. Our time for all ages is about spiritual gifts, spiritual practices, which may be helpful in times of fear. Today, I just want to share a little bit about grounding. Grounding is an act that we sometimes do in activism, that we often do in meditation or spiritual practice. It's getting yourself back to the center of who and where you are, returning from your feelings into your core, where you are balanced and feel at ease. And so, one of the things that can sometimes help with grounding is having something that engages your senses, your sight, smell, touch, even taste could be part of this. Sometimes it's as simple as having something squishy to touch. This is my little stitch that a friend gave me, and just something to fidget with when you're feeling nervous, perhaps because of a new school year. Perhaps you're on a Zoom meeting. You can hold it outside of the box so no one can see that you're fidgeting. Perhaps you have something that helps you to remember who you're trying to be, what you're trying to do. This is a stone that was given to me by a high schooler in one of our UU summer programs last year. It says compassionate. It's something just the right size to hold in my hands when I'm trying to remember something that I need to do. Perhaps touch isn't the sense that you most connect with. Perhaps it's smell. You can use a kind of incense to help bring you back to a sense of smell. I use a wild sage, not a white sage, because people have asked, Native Americans have asked that people who are not of Native American descent not use white sage specifically, because it is an indigenous practice. But using a native sage, or perhaps another herb like rosemary or lavender for calm, you can smell the herb directly, use an essential oil perhaps on your temples or in a diffuser, or burn a little bit of the herb. Smells can connect to memory very directly. So that's another grounding practice that people of all ages can use. Obviously, if you are a child, you should ask your parents before burning things in the house. But also something as simple as taking a sip of water when you need to do something, just to give yourself a moment to remember what you're doing while you're talking. It might give you a sensation of coolness, a flow, and clear your throat to ready you to be courageous. So thinking through all of this, let us remember that being in our bodies is a miracle. Being in our bodies is enough to make us worthy. And having those bodies, remember that the sensations of them can help to ground us in times of fear and difficulty. This can be a spiritual practice that you enact as a living prayer every day. Thank you for being with me and talking about this practice. Next, we engage in a practice of shared community, which we call passing the peace. At this time, I invite you to take a moment to type a blessing in our chat. You might type, "Peace be with you," or "Namaste," "Shalom," "Salam alaikum," "Bright blessings," or "Blessed be." Peace be with you, each and every one, and bright blessings. Our centering words come from Lewis Latimer. What is there in this world besides our loves to keep us here? Ambition's course is paved with hopes deferred, with doubt and fear. Wealth brings no joy, and brazen-throated fame leaves us at last. Naught but an empty name. O soul, receive the truth ere heaven sends thy recall. Not here deserves our thought, but love, for love is all. Lewis Latimer was a Unitarian Universalist and was active in the movement for many years. And at this time, we come to our UU moment, which is today specifically about our church and something wonderful that has happened here. So I'd like to share with you a short video from Ruth Thomas, if I can.
Good morning, friends. This is the story of the little but beautiful church on a hill and the crazy generous benefactors. Once upon a time, there was a little but beautiful church on a hill surrounded by lots of green, natural landscape. The little but beautiful church was spiritual home to some really good people who gave as much financial support to the church as they possibly could. But it still fell short of making ends meet. Well, they said last December at their annual meeting, let's just keep on supporting our 7 principles and living as kind and generous lives as we can. And so they did, and they always remembered to live with gratitude too. Months passed. COVID-19 came and made everything harder. They could never get together with each other for coffee or bring each other sumptuous homemade food for after church. It was hard. Money was tight. Then, one day, a couple of crazy generous benefactors made the church an offer. It came in an email and said, "We have a house on North 4th Street, a duplex, and we were wondering if the church would be interested in owning it. Our idea is to donate the house to the church, which might be used as a low-rent rectory perhaps to help add to your compensation package for the pastor and or for an income stream for the church." Wait, what? That doesn't happen. But it did. The Board of Trustees agreed to have the Finance Committee investigate the house and consider the ramifications to First UU if they accepted this unbelievable offer from Bob and Vera Bonnet, frequent contributors of large sums to First UU. The site was visited, information was gathered, a tentative plan was made. The Finance Committee recommended to our Board of Trustees that they accept the offer. The board did that, and the little but beautiful church on a hill, with its congregation of kind and generous people who were now certainly filled with gratitude, became owners of the duplex building in Indiana Borough located at 427 North 4th Street. At this moment, 425, the lower floor, is occupied by a young AmeriCorps worker who was working for the Western PA Conservancy until very recently. The 427 second floor tenant is known to you as the Reverend Elizabeth Mount, moved in on August 12th. So it's a full house. Soon though, the first floor tenant's lease will expire and Reverend Elizabeth will take over the much nicer first floor. Yes, you may help with moving things. Both tenants do and will pay rent. Some utilities are paid by First UU, the landlord, and some are paid by the tenants. There is a formal lease in effect. The property and the church's ownership of it is considered a business, and all funds for the property are segregated from the church's funds. The Finance Committee is handling the property. Holly is operating a separate set of books so the church's money and the property's money is never combined. The Board and Finance Committee and the congregation never ask to be landlords. There is a lot of work involved with owning and renting property. However, we could not refuse a gift of potentially $90,000 if we sell the property when the market is right. We could not refuse a gift that could create an income stream of thousands of dollars a year if we have 2 tenants, and maybe more if we can rent the garage in the back. As president of the board and friend of the Finance Committee, I ask you all now to celebrate this amazing, needed gift from Bob and Vera Bonnet to the good, kind, generous, grateful people whose spiritual home is the little but beautiful church on a hill, surrounded by lots of green, natural landscape. And they saw good in the world, and they all said, thank you.
And I would love to just give us a moment here to go ahead and say yay, or whatever you would like to say, either in chat or just unmute yourself and let it be a glorious happiness.
Wow.
Super cool.
Too cool. I've been in that house. It's wonderful.
It is.
Well, congratulations,
Congratulations.
all around.
Yeah, we are
Congratulations.
just so pleased to have that generosity.
Thank you,
Thank
Bob
you
and
so much,
Vera.
Ruth, for putting that into a story format so that we could share that with the whole congregation as a new and exciting way that we are more able to live our faith with more resources.
Congratulations again. We may lose you. We're on Grandfather Mountain in North
We
Carolina.
might take you
Oh.
with us.
All right, well, we'll do our best.
Okay.
And with that, we'll go ahead and remute. But I'd like to invite you to speak with us and remind us of the 7 principles, which are the values that unite us and which guide the work that makes people willing to be generous with us and to help this community. So together we covenant to honor the inherent worth and dignity of every person, to practice justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, accept one another and encourage spiritual growth, support the freedom to search for what is true and right in life, to ensure all have a vote about matters that concern them, work for a peaceful, fair, and free world, and care for planet Earth, the home we share with all living things. At this time, we come to our candles of community. I invite you to type your joys and sorrows in the chat bar to share as you feel moved. And as that happens, our centering music will be How Can I Keep From Singing? It's performed by the New York City Virtual Choir and Orchestra, which formed after the onset of the coronavirus when New York was locked down for so many weeks.
My life goes on in endless song above earth's lamentation. I hear the real, the far off hymn that hails a new creation.
No storm can shake my inmost calm, while to that rock I'm clinging, since love prevails in heaven and earth. How can I keep from singing? While all the tempest round me roars, I know the truth it liveth, and though the darkness round me calls, songs in the night it giveth. No storm can shake my inmost song, while to that rock I'm clinging, since love prevails in heaven and earth. How can I keep from singing? I lift my eyes, the cloud grows thin. I see the blue above it, and day by day this pathway smooths. Since first I learned to love it, no storm can shake my inmost calm. I hear the music ringing, it sounds an echo in my soul. How can I keep from singing?
So let us join hearts and minds and spirits together in prayer. Spirit of life and of love, Spirit of all that we hold sacred, we gather together to share in community the milestones of our living. On this Sunday, we have so much to be grateful for and to be glad of. We share blessings and gratitude that the Bonnets have given such a generous gift. My personal gratitude to each and every one of you who helped with moving. That was a whole lot of boxes and furniture. And I really appreciate how many of our congregants made that a much easier and faster process than it could have been. I want to share a joy from the Butlers that they have a new 8-month-old puppy dog, a collie named Pippin, who they have fallen in love with, as have I. I don't know if you all have seen on Facebook, but that is one cute dog. We also share a more serious joy. Pauline Sims was in the hospital briefly last week, but seems to be recovering well, and it is wonderful to see her face. In addition to our joys, we have sorrows and concerns and grief to bear. Nana's Aunt Lois has entered hospice care with dementia, and we lift up our prayers for Lois and for the whole family as they deal with this loss, this grief. And for Juanita and Judith's nephew, Donald, whose cancer treatments continue to not go as well as hoped, we lift up in care that family. And we are grateful that Kathy's brother-in-law, who was in hospital for surgery, seems to be on the road to recovery. Our hopes that that continues. It is hard, and even harder than usual, to be in the hospital with coronavirus making family visits difficult or non-existent. Yet we lift up in gratitude all those workers who are still making sure of the health of those around them. We lift up in gratitude all those who are volunteering to help and assure that our democracy remains stable, that our people are healthy, that all people have food and shelter and clean water. For all these things of life must continue, even in times of disease, even when times are difficult. And we hold in care Judith, who will be having a procedure on Thursday. Our thoughts will especially be with her then. Also on Thursday, Dorothy's brother is having a hip replacement. So let us bring our attention to each and every person whose medical care needs to be done well and carefully in a place where disease transmission can be a concern. We pray that the careful and thoughtful and timely use of medical care by skilled doctors and nurses and caregivers will bring them to health and bring them home safe. for all those who are educators or whose children are going back to school in just the next few weeks, we also hold in care all the concerns, all of the unknowing, all of the fear which we feel, not able to understand yet what it will mean to be online or in person, what it will look like, whether we will be safe, whether the students will be able to learn and feel cared for in these changed environments. We know that this is the world we live in, and yet it is hard. And so we lift up our prayers that the sustaining bonds of community will be strong enough to hold us through it all. Through all of this, may we hold fast to gratitude for what is good. May we know that the beauty of the earth, the changing seasons, and the flowing gift of life are greater than all of our human cares. May we lift those up and give thanks for the ever-turning world. In times of fragile hearts and tender sorrows, may we find comfort and strength, and may our hearts be healed, and may we be filled with peace. Amen, and blessed be. We now come to that time in our service where we give back. We share the plate each week, giving a portion of the donations to an organization beyond the church. Every week when you give to your pledge, whether it is online through PayPal or by sending a check or a money order to the church or dropping it off outside for the church office, know that you are helping both within and beyond these walls to continue the good work of this congregation in the times that are today and those to come. So please give as you are able, and know that the gift of your presence is also enough.
Blessed be the gifts, blessed be the gifts, the ones we give and those that you reveal. Help us use our gifts, our varied simple gifts, to show our love and help our world to heal. Revive our tired minds, make our hearts more just and kind. Give us souls that rally to the task. Fight for justice, help us teach, help us act and care and reach out to others with a hand for them to clasp.
On faith and on fear. It seems the time for such a service. It seems the time to talk about what we do when we are scared. Because I don't know about you, but I have never been in a situation like this. A pandemic, a time when we are not allowed to be outside of our houses touching one another, when we can't go to church to be comforted in person, can't get a hug. I'm willing to bet that none of us have ever been in quite this situation. And yet I know that with this church, with this faith, we are not without resources. We have been practicing for this moment, perhaps all our lives. We have examples from the past. We have ancestors to look back on, practices and choices that people have made, examples. We can look around ourselves right now at other countries, other communities, what their decisions have been to protect health and safety, sometimes even at great economic cost. We have resources, we have knowledge, and we have community. We have people at our side to support and sustain us. And so we may have fear, but we know we also have courage and strength. I am reminded in these times, not just times of disease, but times where politics are making life hard for one group after another, making it difficult to feel that we can be secure, to know that we will have housing, that we will have food, that we will have all the basics of life, education, a postal service that works to send our words to our loved ones. Without these things, we feel destabilized. And yet, we do have resources. Dr. Sharon Welch, a professor at Meadville Lombard Theological School, asks an important question. How does a movement, how does a community persist in the face of partial victories and continued defeats? This feels like an appropriate question to ask in this time. Her answer is what she calls an ethic of risk. That one must take, as she says, responsible action within the limits of bounded power, naming the resources that evoke persistent defiance and resistance in the face of repeated defeats. This ethic of risk, one that is grounded in Unitarian Universalist principles, tells us that winning or losing is not the reason that we fight. That persistent defiance, that resistance, comes from the core of us, from our ethics, from our 7 principles, which call us to justice and equity and compassion in human relations, which command us to affirm and to promote a world with justice and liberty for all. That is where our courage comes from our values, from the deep resources of our soul, and not only our own, for these are not individual values, they are shared ones. In our faith community, we know there are others who will support and uplift those same values. with us. This community can sustain us. This community can support us. This community can continue to make a difference and shift the balance. And when we refuse to stay silent, we can protect more people, not only one another, but far beyond us. The choices we make reverberate. Like a stone dropped in a pond, the ripples spreading ever outward from every community, every congregation that makes the choice to keep one another safe and to speak out about our values, about the deep love that commits us to staying socially distant, even as we are spiritually together, even as our love reaches out. Being scared is natural. Fear is a part of the human psyche because it serves a purpose. It protects you from things you cannot fight. Way back when, I like to say, it keeps you from being eaten by tigers. There's a good reason that babies get scared when their caregivers wander off from them, even for a few minutes. You don't want to get eaten by a big cat. You don't want to be pounced on by the things that go bump in the night when you can't fight back. Yet, from the dawn of time, our strength has been in reaching out, in asking for help and support. A baby can't fight off anything, but a baby's cry draws attention and draws help. Humans banded together in communities and made hunting parties and went out looking for tigers. We form communities and bring ourselves together to defeat those things we fear when we have courage, when we understand ourselves to be part of something greater. The only thing we have to fear, said Franklin Delano Roosevelt, is fear itself. And in the grand scheme of things, yes, the greatest barrier to our good choices is fear. Fear that keeps us silent. Fear that inhibits us from doing the right thing. But I want to name that it's real to worry about safety. You should worry about your health when there is a virus that could harm you and your family so greatly. And we worry about other things, maintaining connections to friends and family, being socially acceptable, or angering our neighbors. There are real consequences of the choices we may be called to make. And so we need to ask ourselves, how? How do we make it through all of that? How do we keep from being paralyzed? And Dr. Welsh says some of this is about not staying comfortable. She says it is easier to give up on long-term social change when one is comfortable in the present, when it is possible to have challenging work, excellent healthcare and housing, access to the fine arts. When the good life is present or within reach, it is tempting to despair of its ever being in reach for others and resort merely to enjoying it for oneself and one's family. In this way, this time, however difficult it may be, is in some ways a blessing, for no one is comfortable right now. And that means no one is so tempted to give up the fight for their own comfort. We all have a stake in making a world that is safe enough to come back to church, safe enough to go to the grocery store and hug a friend when you see them in the aisles, safe enough to watch a baseball game or a basketball game in person, safe enough to attend a graduation with all those whose successes we wish to celebrate. No one is comfortable right now. And in that, we find in our discomfort the courage that sustains us, the courage that has always been there, sometimes glossed over by the ease of letting ourselves drift. And so we define a responsible action, as Welsh says, for the ethic of risk. We define that responsible action. We ground ourselves again and again each week in community, and we take strategic risks. We must. There is no other way to live this life but to risk. So we do not dismiss our fear. We simply hold tight to something comforting and move forward anyway, even in the face of difficulty. I want to tell you one more story about someone named Dolores Huerta. Dolores was a child of farm workers and a teacher. She learned quickly that teaching could make some long-term change, but that to serve an entire community, she needed to be active in organizing whole families. That teaching only one grade level, one group of students per year was not enough. She learned, as our church does, that the multi-generational work was what gave people the courage and the community to be able to do what they needed to do. So she worked on building the United Farm Workers alongside Cesar Chavez, building a union that went beyond ethnic lines, beyond class lines sometimes. It involved entire families, children coming to marches, elders helping to pass out pamphlets. I want us to remember this and to continue this kind of work, as we have always in this church. When you teach your children about justice and about action, it matters for our future. When our children and youth and young people involve elders in the work that they are doing, it matters. It continues the fight and it shifts the balance. We need one another for support and resources. We need to be lifelong learners to keep up our courage. Dolores Huerta is 90 years old now, and she still has a hand in the Dolores Huerta Foundation, a foundation that she started to inspire and motivate people to organize sustainable communities and attain social justice. She started that foundation back in 1988 with the money she received from a settlement after being beaten by police in San Francisco. She has offered all of her life courage for the struggle, protecting herself and her family in ways that look to the future. I'm not asking any of you to stand in that way against police if that is not what you are called to do. But what I am asking you to do is to be a supporter of one another, to offer your resources to struggles that support our ethics and our values, to be aware of who you are, be aware of where you are in the struggle and what the gifts you can bring might be, to be a team so that we can go out and hunt tigers, not huddle in the darkness, hoping they don't attack. Life is the gift that we cling to in all that is hard. There is the knowledge that our very survival, our thriving, our being alive in spite of everything, it matters. It is inherently enough because you are worthy of life and of thriving. So my message to you today is this: you are worthy. You are worthy of protection, and this community will help you to survive. You are worthy and dignified and strong and courageous enough to be one of the protectors. Not everything can be saved, and it is all right to take space and time to lament. You cannot control it all, but it is our great call to lift up what we can into a life that is worth living. May your life be one worth living each day. May you know that when it does not feel like you are there, this is the community to call upon, to help you to make that life one in which you can thrive beyond fear, in love, for love is all. Blessed be. Our closing hymn is When I Am Frightened, and is performed by the First Unitarian Church of Baltimore.
When I am frightened, you reassure
And now we extinguish our chalice flame. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. And so, as love remains, may you go forth from this place, knowing you are held always in infinite love. Love that surrounds and encompasses you wherever you go. For this community exists beyond space, beyond time, beyond walls, beyond anything we can imagine. We are a people who believe in a world that can be. Let us go forth with the courage to work for it. Blessed be. And please feel welcome to stay for our coffee hour.